Picture this, the absolute coldest, most frost-bitten regions on Earth, just baking under a relentless sun. Oceans, quite literally, boiling with trapped heat. And wildfires consuming expanses of land the size of entire nations. It sounds like a disaster movie, right? Well, it's not fiction. This is the documented reality we're seeing in the European State of the Climate 2025 report. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the hard data from the World Meteorological Organization and the Copernicus Climate Change Service to see exactly how one extreme event is triggering another in a relentless, continent-wide cascade. Okay, let's dive right into what is honestly a pretty chilling paradox. When we think of subarctic regions like Norway, Sweden, and Finland, we obviously picture ice and freezing temperatures. But the data reveals a completely fractured reality. This region just endured a record-breaking 3-week heatwave right in the middle of July. We're talking temperatures entirely within the Arctic Circle, smashing past 30 degrees Celsius, and actually peaking at a staggering 34.9 degrees in Norway. Environments fundamentally designed by nature to be freezing are rapidly warming up. And look, this isn't just a localized anomaly, it's literally the trigger pulling a massive chain reaction. Which brings us to Section 1. The fastest warming continent. See, that localized Arctic heat is just one symptom of a much larger fever. In 2025, at least 95% of Europe experienced above average annual temperatures. Take a second to process that. Almost the entire continent, from the Mediterranean all the way up to the Arctic, was running hotter than historical averages. The area of Europe that usually gets freezing winter days is shrinking right before our eyes. Florian Poppenberger, the Director General over at the ECMWF, really hit the nail on the head here. He states, Europe is the fastest warming continent, and the impacts are already severe. We aren't talking about some distant future projection modeled for 2050 or 2100 anymore. The severe impacts are already unfolding all around us, right now. So what happens next? Let's move to Section 2, melting the coldest regions. You probably already know about the albedo effect, right? That crucial ability of bright white surfaces, like snow and ice, to act as a giant mirror, reflecting sunlight and its heat right back into space. It critically slows down climate change. Because when we lose this reflective white shield, the darker earth and water beneath are exposed. They absorb way more heat, violently accelerating that warming loop. The sheer physical scale of what we've lost is literally hard to wrap your head around. In March 2025, European snow cover was 31% below average. That drop equals a landmass the size of France, Italy, Germany, Switzerland, and Austria combined, just completely stripped of its snow. It was the third lowest snow extent since records began back in 1983. And the ice isn't faring any better. Glaciers across all European regions saw a net mass loss. Meanwhile, the Greenland ice sheet lost an incomprehensible 139 billion tons of ice in 2025 alone. To put that into perspective, that is roughly 1.5 times the volume of all the ice in the entire European Alps, pouring directly into the sea in a single year. And remember, every centimeter of global sea level rise exposes another 6 million people to coastal flooding. All that heat has to go somewhere. That leads us to Section 3, boiling the surrounding oceans. The global ocean acts as a massive sponge for excess heat generated by human-induced emissions. But right now, that sponge is reaching its absolute limit. In 2025, we saw the highest annual European sea surface temperatures on record. A staggering 86% of the region experienced marine heat waves. And this oceanic heat doesn't just stay in the water. It makes the air on land heavy and hot, meaning our bodies can't adequately recover overnight from heat stress. And of course, as those ocean and atmospheric patterns shift, the cascade violently strikes the land. Let's look at Section 4, fire and drought on land. Across Europe, an astonishing 70% of rivers experienced below-average flows throughout the year. For 11 whole months of 2025, water levels were suppressed. By May, over half of the entire continent was affected by drought conditions. The land was absolutely parched, turning vast regions into a literal tinderbox. And that extreme drought fueled record-breaking destruction. Over 1 million hectares of land were burnt to ash by wildfires. It's the largest area burnt on record for Europe. Fueled by exceptionally hot, dry conditions, the continent essentially caught fire. To put that staggering number into a real-world perspective for you, the fire damage is actually larger than the entire island nation of Cyprus. Spain alone accounted for half of the massive wildfire emissions, while places like the UK, the Netherlands, and Germany recorded their highest emissions ever. Which brings us to the inevitable fallout of all this, Section 5, the cost to nature. Samantha Burgess, the strategic lead for climate at ECMWF, put it very starkly. She warns, climate change is not a future threat, it is our present reality. And this present reality is degrading everything in its path. Marine heat waves are devastating crucial underwater habitats like Mediterranean seagrass meadows. On land, wildfires are burning right through peatlands. And since those peatlands act as massive natural carbon stores, destroying them releases even more carbon into the atmosphere, which creates, you guessed it, yet another vicious warming loop. But listen, it's not all doom and gloom. Let's head into our final chapter, Section 6, a race to adapt. Because this cascade does not have to end in total environmental collapse. There is a massive fightback underway. In 2025, nearly half of Europe's entire electricity grid, 46.4% to be exact, came from renewable sources. Solar power specifically hit a brand new record. The energy transition is accelerating rapidly to cut the emissions that are driving this whole crisis. And on the adaptation front, European policy is evolving fast. Through frameworks like the European Green Deal, policies are now treating climate change and biodiversity loss as one single interconnected mission. The continent has committed to legally binding targets to restore 20% of land and sea areas by 2030 and all ecosystems in need by 2050. They are relying heavily on nature-based solutions, like restoring those vital seagrass meadows and peatlands to rebuild the natural resilience that the climate cascades stripped away. So as we watch the fastest warming continent battle these unprecedented extremes, it leaves us with the ultimate question. Will our energy transitions and adaptations accelerate fast enough to break this cascading chain? The 2025 data shows us exactly what we're up against. Now we decide what we do next. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the data around